7 Grand Slams before turning 23. Let that sink in for a second. Carlos Alcaraz is not just winning. He is warping the timeline of tennis history. And now a former coach of Roger Federer has said something that is shaking the tennis world. He believes it is actually easier for Alcaraz to win multiple Grand Slams today than it was for the legends before him. Easier. That word alone is enough to start arguments in every tennis group chat on the planet. Because when we talk about easier in tennis, we are talking about the era of Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. The era that most fans call most brutal, most competitive, and most mentally exhausting period the sport has ever seen. And yet Ivan Ljubicic, a man who has lived inside that world and helped guide Federer late in his career, is saying that what those three did is change the mental game for players like Alcaraz in a way that makes stacking slams more realistic. Now, before anyone starts shouting that this is disrespectful, listen carefully. Well, Ljubicic is not saying Alcaraz is less talented. He is not saying today's tour is weak. He is pointing to something deeper, something psychological, something about belief and expectations that might be just as important as forehands and serves. Think back to the early 2000s. Pete Sampras had set the standard with 14 Grand Slams. 14 felt untouchable. It felt like a mountain that maybe one player in a generation could climb. When Federer started winning, people were not talking about 20. They were talking about chasing Sampras. 14 was a dream. That was a ceiling in everyone's mind. Then everything exploded. Federer did not just reach 14, he blew past it. Nadal came charging in from the clay and refused to stay in one lane. Djokovic turned himself into a machine and refused to let either of them breathe. Suddenly, the idea of 20 slams was not fantasy. It was real. Then it became 21, 22, 24 and counting. Ljubicic's point is simple but powerful. When the target moves at high, early success feels different. If a player in Sampras' era had 7 slams at 22, the tennis world would already be screaming that he was halfway to immortality. That pressure could crush someone. Every match would feel like history on the line. But today, 7 feels like the beginning of the conversation, not the end. That changes how a young champion sees his own success. Instead of thinking, "I am almost there," he thinks, "I am just getting started." That shift in perspective can remove a layer of fear that haunted earlier generations. And that is where Alcaraz enters the story like a lightning bolt in sneakers. Carlos Alcaraz has not climbed slowly. He has sprinted. By the age of 22, he already has 7 Grand Slam titles. 7. At an age where Federer had only 3. Nadal had 6. Djokovic had just 1. Let that comparison breathe for a second, because it is not normal. We are not talking about a promising youngster. We are talking about a player whose early career numbers are ahead of the 3 men who rewrote tennis history. That alone would be enough to create unbearable pressure in another era. But Alcaraz plays with a smile, with joy, with a sense that he belongs exactly where he is. That is the blueprint Ljubicic is talking about. Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic did not just win titles. They mapped out what a 20-plus slam career looks like. They showed how to manage the schedule, how to peak at the right events, how to build teams, how to handle media storms, and most importantly, how to survive the mental marathon of chasing history for 15 years. Alcaraz grew up watching that. He did not grow up wondering if it was possible. He grew up knowing it was possible because he saw it on his screen every season. That kind of belief is different from blind ambition. It is informed belief. It is belief with evidence. And you can see it in the way he handles big moments. Down a break in a slam final, he does not panic. 5-set war under the lights, he does not shrink. He plays like someone who expects to be there again and again, not like someone afraid this might be his only chance. That mindset is terrifying for the rest of the tour. Because here is the scary part. Alcaraz is not dominating a weak field. He is beating elite players in high-pressure situations. He is winning on different surfaces. He is adapting his game constantly. And he is doing it while still improving physically and tactically every season. So when Ljubicic says it is easier mentally to win 7 now than it was in Borg's era, he is talking about the weight of the number. Bjorn Borg winning 7 at a young age felt like reaching the top of Everest with no oxygen. The number itself was historic. It screamed legacy. For Alcaraz, 7 is step 1, a much taller ladder. The expectation is not 10. The expectation is 25. That sounds insane, but that is the world the Big Three created. They stretch the limits so far that the next generation measures greatness on a completely different scale that can free a player instead of trapping him. Instead of defending a small number, you are chasing a huge one. Psychologically, chasing can be lighter than protecting. But let's not pretend this is all sunshine and open roads. With those higher targets comes a different kind of pressure. When people are already predicting you might reach 20 slams before your career is even half written, every loss becomes a headline. Every injury scare becomes a crisis. Every early exit becomes a debate about whether the dream is slipping. Alcaraz is walking a tightrope between freedom and expectation, and so far, he is dancing across it. What impresses me most is not just the trophies. It is how complete his game already looks. He can defend 10 feet behind the baseline and then subtly knife a drop shot that leaves opponents frozen. He can blast forehands past you or outlast you in rallies that feel like physical exams. That versatility is exactly what you need to win across Melbourne, Paris, London, and New York. And remember, he is still building his body. He is still learning how to schedule a season without burning out. He is still figuring out how to handle being the hunted instead of the hunter. If this is the early version, the finished version could be frightening. Now here is where the debate gets spicy. Some fans hear Ljubicic's comments and think he is downplaying the difficulty of today's tour. I do not see it that way. I see it as a compliment wrapped in realism. The physical level today is brutal. The depth is real. But the psychological map left behind by the Big Three is a gift. Alcaraz does not have to invent greatness from scratch. He is following a trail that has already been carved through the jungle. That does not make the journey easy. It makes it possible. And possibility is powerful. So the real question is not whether it is easier or harder. The real question is this. Can Alcaraz stay healthy, hungry, and humble long enough to turn this fast start into a historic finish? Because we have seen fast starts before in sports. We have seen young stars burn bright and fade. The difference with Alcaraz is that his game does not rely on one trick. It is layered. It is creative. It gives him options when plan A fails. That is champion DNA. But history is ruthless. Federer finished with 20. Nadal with 22. Djokovic is still pushing the number higher. To even enter that conversation, Alcaraz cannot just win a few more. He needs a second act, a third act, and maybe even a late career reinvention. That is where Ljubicic's experience with Federer becomes interesting. He saw firsthand how hard it is to stay at the top once your body starts arguing with your ambition. He saw the daily work behind the elegance. If he says the mental framework today helps young champions, it is because he knows what the old framework looked like. Alcaraz is not chasing ghosts in the dark. He is chasing giants in daylight. He can study their careers like textbooks, what tournaments they skipped, how they recovered from losses, how they extended their primes. That knowledge might be the hidden advantage of this era. Still, none of that swings a racket for you on break point down in a slam final. That is on Carlos. And so far, he looks ready for the burden. The wild part is we might still be underestimating him. 7 slams at this age used to sound like a career. Now it sounds like a prologue. So I want to know what you think. Is Ljubicic right that the mental road to multiple slams is smoother now? Or does today's depth make it just as brutal in a different way? And more importantly, how many slams do you honestly see Alcaraz finishing with when it's all said and done? Because we are not just watching a great player. We might be watching the opening chapters of the next all-time record chase. And if that is true, every slam from here on is not just a trophy. It is a step toward a number that once felt impossible. That is the shadow Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic cast. And that is the light Alcaraz is running toward. Tennis IQ is where we break down the stories behind the scorelines, the mind games behind the trophies, and the moments that shape the future of the sport. Stick with us, because this era is just getting started.